So, ladies and gentlemen, friends, welcome into a special edition of the Soccer Tejas podcast. Thanks to all of you that are joining us. Hopefully, you can hear us. Hopefully, you're enjoying what we're going to talk about. Number one, and we're going to talk a lot about the match that's upcoming here in just a few minutes. I'm Alex Parra. Let me welcome in a couple of people here in studio with me this evening. The one and only Victor Araiza. Victor, how are you this evening?
Great, Alex. Obviously, looking forward to this playoff game. I think this one against the Sounders will definitely give the Houston a bit more of a taste of one of the prime contenders in MLS in round one.
Round one. So a lot to talk about in this round one. Beyond having Victor, we also have the expertise. You see her on screen, Laura Gomez. Laura, good evening. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm a little under the weather. So if you hear some coughing here and there, doesn't mean that I'm trying to give you like a secret message or anything. It just means that I'm actually trying to cough.
You can't be less under the weather than this gentleman here, you know? Anyway,
Exactly.
so Laura, help me out here on the technology. I believe we're streaming live on several platforms, on Deportes Nation, also on Soccer Tejas. So if, number one, you can hear us and see us, send us a shout out. We appreciate it. Number two, if you want to interact with us, Laura and Victor and I, certainly the old guy, will attempt to either answer your questions or address them in some way. And we're very appreciative of you following us. But let's get right into it. We're less than half an hour away, Victor, from round one. Technically, we've already had a round of MLS playoffs, but the Houston Dynamo, they're round one against Seattle, playing at Lumen Field. It's never an easy task.
Right. And like I said, in this case, coming to decision day, it was still a little iffy who they would face. Well, we know it's going to be the Sounders. And I know some people were probably saying, well, Salt Lake, they've already beaten them before last year's playoffs,
right.
The U.S. Open Cup. But I really think this is going to be a good test for Houston. I think Seattle's probably, for me, in that group of the five teams that could truly contend for an MLS Cup because of the roster, because of the experience, because of the coach, Brian Schmetzer, who they just renewed, by the way. And, of course, Seattle is going to be in the Club World Cup. That tells you the long trajectory that this team has. So I think it'll be a good test. But also, let's remember, round one is a best-of-3 series, Alex. And you don't even have to win. If a game ends in a draw and it goes to penalties, the winner in penalties gets the win for that game. No aggregate score, so you could technically lose the first game 5-0 and still come back and win the series. So
right.
It's very iffy. It's very MLS. But I think that's something that could benefit the Dynamo.
And the Dynamos are now, Laura, entering their second consecutive year making the playoffs. This certainly is an improvement, literally over a decade of disappointment. Let's start there. In general terms, another season in which Ben Olsen has taken his team to the playoffs. We discussed this on the Soccer Tejas podcast. Is it enough? Is this just another necessary step? And is the team ready to compete against the Seattles of the MLS?
In the last couple of days, I've kind of read up a lot of the Dynamo things because, as you guys well know, the Dash has been my life for the last couple of years, and the Dynamo has been in the back burner. So I've kind of went in and listened to more and see what's going on, and a lot of the things that I keep hearing from, like, whether it goes from like fans or like maybe Fox and other sports stations, is like the Dynamo has never won pretty. It's one of the things they keep saying. The Dynamo has never won pretty. And what they see in this team and what they see in the past teams perhaps is that kind of hustle, that kind of wanting to win. So it's interesting to see. Is it enough as a fan? I mean, it's a playoff. Yes, that's a nice step. But again, just due to their track record in the past, for me, it's not enough. Again, the ones that win the cups are the ones that are the winners at the end of the day, right? And it's nice to say, oh, you guys made it to the playoffs 10 years in a row. Good job. But that's not enough. I'm not saying, obviously, it's not been, 10 years in a row, but it's just really saying that the Houston people obviously want more after waiting for so long is my kind of saying of it.
Victor, that disappointment for so long makes many of us incredulous, makes many of us doubtful, makes many of us, I'm going to use this word, hesitant to get behind the team because we don't want to be disappointed. Is that fair?
I think you're what is being called a hater, Alex. Look, I do think there is a new wave, I believe, of Dynamo fans that I think are relishing in this, this run. Like you said, 2 consecutive years in the playoffs. I do think, I am seeing some belief, right?
Yeah.
Oh, they can go all the way. Again, to be seen. But I do think there is more belief out there than maybe some detractors. Let's put it that way. I still think there's a lot of longtime fans that I think are hesitant but aren't really saying it.
Sure.
So you can maybe feel that. But let's see. This is where they can prove it. A team like Seattle, this is where they can prove. Can they beat a team like this? If they beat them outright, even better. But again, I do think it does help them. That little twerk of being able to go to penalties.
Speaking of fans, friends, those of you that are following us, tanto en español or in English, si tienen preguntas o comentarios, adelante, por favor. Queremos escuchar de ustedes. Laura, Victor, help me. If we have a question or a comment, we're on different platforms. We would greatly appreciate it. And let's begin with this. How much energy right now does Houston Dynamo fans have going into tonight? It's late. It's a Monday. We've gotten through the weekend of sports. The World Series is going on. Laura, do you think that Dynamo and MLS playoffs get lost? And I know where I'm going to finish my question with. And by the way, you've got to find it tonight on Apple TV Plus, right? So.
Oh, it's free. It's free.
Okay.
It's free.
But
it's free. That's why I'm going to watch it.
All right. So the only reason
You
Laura's
have to
going
have
to
an
watch
Apple
it.
account, but it's free.
Okay, but you've got to go set up your Apple account if you don't have it and go through that process, correct, Laura? And it is a process versus just switching your TV on, knowing where you want to go. Is it too difficult to be accessible?
I mean, honestly, I do think that it does possess a lot of barriers, specifically for perhaps the older generation that loves soccer. Like my dad can watch soccer 24/7. It does not matter. That man will sit there and watch soccer reruns over and over. Like he's become like the Liga MX expert now because of so many years of having the access to it, just to turn on the TV and have that kind of soccer just flowing. So to me, it is, I think that there's more access to it, there's going to be more fans. I don't care what all these, presidents tell me, the money, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. There needs to be more accessibility for everybody in Houston to be able to watch the team, specifically when they're in playoffs, to make it more important. I do think that a lot of people are going to want to stay up, and no matter if there was, playoffs and other matches in the weekend, it doesn't matter. It's a brand new day. You're getting off of work, maybe you need to relax, or maybe you want to stress out more watching the Dynamo. I don't know. It just really depends how it goes. So I do think that there's fans and there's people that love sports in general that are going to want to stay up and really see this game.
Now, let's talk on the field. And I don't know if we yet have the lineups, Victor, which might give us an idea of what Ben Olsen is thinking. In his press conference prior to this match, I should say, a few days ago, he talked about, format doesn't bother me. Motivation, these gentlemen are professionals. I see a confidence in Ben Olsen. I see a confidence in the team versus as we're here. Well, that's enough. I seriously see them having tonight an opportunity with a victory to do things in the MLS playoffs. It's a confident team. It's a team that's finding the way consistently also to win on the road, Victor. This is a road challenge. Teams that win championships, have defense, number one. That's my general rule, and know how to win as an away team.
And they are good defensively. I think the way they play very narrow. It's designed to keep games close, right? I would like to see them a little bit more attacking-wise,
Sure.
Open up a little bit.
Yep.
But, at the end, if it gets the job done, if they can win games that way, especially in the playoffs, which I think is where they still have to prove it against teams like this, then more power to them. In the end, that's what you're trying to do: win, advance, and get to the MLS Cup.
Get to the next round and see what damage you can do. Do you have any updates on the lineups?
We do have the lineup, so we pretty much unchanged for the Houston Dynamo, right? What we always expect: Clark in goal, back line of Griffin Dorsey, Eric Sviatchenko, Mikhail, and Franco Escobar is back. He was suspended for the previous game. That middle trio of Hector Herrera, who's got a new haircut, by the way, Alberto Carrasquilla, and Artur. Up front, here's your front three: Amin Bassi, Aliou Ibrahim, and Ezequiel Ponce. So again, I think a very typical Dynamo of what we're used to seeing. Ben Olsen's not going to change that lineup, and I think also maybe a little bit typical of what we see from Seattle. If you're ready for that lineup.
Sure, please.
Stefan Fry in goal, which obviously is
another veteran.
big figure in the playoffs. Back line of Nuhu, Jackson Reagan, Yeimar, and Alex Roldan. In the middle, we'll see João Paulo come in for the, I believe, suspended Ovid Vargas, along with Christian Roldan in front. Paul Rothrock, young Seattle kid who's been a pest, we can say that way, against the Houston Dynamo. Albert Rusnak in the middle, De La Vega, the Argentine, and Jordan Morris up front.
Morris.
So we saw Houston go up to Seattle a few weeks ago. Didn't exactly get the win. It's been a tough place for Houston. I don't think they've ever won there actually in history. So call it turf, call it the opposing team, call it the crowd.
The weather.
Maybe history meant to be broken, right?
Tonight would be the night. Laura, as you look in here and we see this lineup, does anything jump out at you? I think to me, it's probably a very solid Ben Olsen team that has had confidence with when I think of the midfield in particular, and Carrasquilla, by the way, who's just named the CONCACAF Player of the Year. That speaks volumes. And Ben Olsen talked about he didn't really know he was a candidate, but he didn't doubt his ability, and also that Carrasquilla has a lot of weight on his shoulders when he's representing Panama. I think he does that well here too, and I think the combo of him and HH have certainly made a difference in the last 2 years.
Yeah, I think that, I was looking at the Dynamo feed a couple of days ago or a week ago, and it was showing Carrasquilla actually meeting up with the fans, and they showed a really long line of people actually going out there and wanting to meet him. So I think that's really good, and it's kind of fomenting, again, wanting people to go out there and meet the players.
They finally got him out there.
I know. I was waiting for you to chime in. Let me give you your few seconds.
Podcast episode. We're like, hey, where's Carrasquilla?
Were they
there you go.
Were they listening? Shh, be quiet.
They heard you. But as far as the lineups of both teams, I do think that both teams are kind of equal. They're not very, I don't feel like there's going to be a big difference of a 5-0 or 3-0. I feel like both teams are very defensive, and they're kind of really, head to head in that sort of sense of being a little bit more defensive more than attacking. So maybe a 1-0, a 1-1, but it's going to be pretty tight, at least in this first game. And, if the Dynamo goes out there and gets a tie, I think it's something I would take it as a win, just knowing their history, like Victor said, at the stadium, and the Lumen Stadium, Lumium Field, the history in there. So I think it would be a positive if they even get a tie.
Well, Laura, you're already getting a little bit ahead of me in my next kind of line of questioning, which is it's a 3-game series. Clearly, for Houston, they'll only have one game at home. It's not a given that they'll pick up the victory here. But do you look at it, Victor, from a one game only, or do you look at it as a set of games and you strategically, as Laura just mentioned, say, listen, if we get up 1-0 in the 13th minute, we're going to park the bus and hang in there? Or do you go for it all, knowing that maybe you get behind, it doesn't matter? Ben Olsen spoke about, listen, in my time in the MLS, as a player, as a coach, I've seen so many different formats, and we've seen different ways of approaching the playoffs. In this case, yes, you have to know the rules. You have to know the context of what we can do within the 3-game series. But what is your strategy when you're going into this particular situation against Seattle?
Well, I think, we've seen Houston, again, if they can be aggressive from the beginning, that would help them a lot. If they do, I think, if they get that first goal, we've seen them defend it and then try to see out a 1-goal lead. I think that's what we would see in their case. And again, in the end, what you're trying to do is you're going to survive, right? Get out of Seattle. You're really the one you're kind of banking on winning is the one at home, right? In front of your home fans. And if you can steal one in Seattle, again, you don't necessarily have to win. You could take it to penalties. So I could see a game where Houston, tries to keep it 0-0 and go into, you don't have to play overtime, and then you got the next game at home. That could be a strategy. The one thing is Seattle's been good at home. 2 weeks ago, or a couple weeks ago, sorry, when we saw them up there, Seattle dominated that game, even though it was a close scoreline.
Right.
I think we could see some of that tonight. Maybe, again, if João Paulo's not up to being 100%, maybe that's something you can exploit. I would like to see the Dynamo kind of go punch him in the face, go after it,
be aggressive,
try to get a couple goals.
Yeah.
And because I think, going back to your question, this format allows you to maybe experiment a little bit, right? In this first game, if you don't win or if you get beat 5-0, it doesn't matter because you still got 2 games.
That's correct.
And as long as you see them out, and especially the pressure is going to be on Seattle because they have the 2 games at home. Again, Houston, I don't think, you say you see them relax. I think it's because they don't have anything to lose.
Right.
The bar's been so low here in Houston that it's, I mean, no, like in a good way though.
There's
but
no high
because-
expectation.
Right, because it's great to see them in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And then whatever they do, again, it's a great situation to be in.
You put in the 5-hour flight. You put in the change, Laura, of time zones. You put in the change in weather because it's much cooler than it is in Houston. That weighs on the players at this point? Or listen, it's been a long MLS season. They've pretty much seen it all. It's not really a factor. And I'll throw one more factor in there, which is the synthetic turf at Lubin.
I mean, honestly, I think that the weather thing, I mean, they're used to it. Most of these players have been with MLS. Maybe it'll hit the newbies a little bit harder than
Sure.
the rest of them. But I think that the professional players, they do specific things, whether it's doing like, the sauna or doing like the ice baths or even like the oxygen therapy. They do different things and they have like the best of the best. So they can do different things to adapt, quicker than perhaps you and I would be able to adapt if we have to go play or do something up there.
Get out of the heat.
There you go. You see?
You know what? I'll be honest with you. Whenever you get out of this heat, it's like coming down from altitude. It can be refreshing. Your lungs feel like you could run all night, to be honest with you.
They're all wearing hoodies
Exactly.
from
No,
what I
yeah.
saw.
They what?
Yeah, there's a
I said they're all
difference. I
wearing
mean,
hoodies from what I
They
saw.
were wearing hoodies, exactly.
Well, we're
Yeah.
over here Halloween season and it's still hot.
exactly. No, and over there it actually does feel like fall, but I think that also maybe it does help the body last a little longer when it's cooler because the humidity here is what really brings down players when they come here and play because it's not only hot, but the humidity really drains you and kind of like weighs you down. So I think it's even better for them to play over there, honestly. So with the synthetic one, it's just really a personal preference. Whenever I played in, semi-professional in high school, I didn't like
This was a
the-
very long time ago, by the way, before climate change.
yeah. I didn't like, the synthetic turf. I just didn't feel like it was the same thing. The ball didn't travel the same. I don't know. It's my preference. I don't think it's the same thing. The game doesn't do the same in my opinion. But again, they're professionals. They've played before. A lot of them play, indoor soccer, do all the other different things besides playing this. So they have the capabilities of being, again, able to adapt quickly.
Yeah, and that's part of the reality of the league, adapted to different circumstances, different configurations of fields and different time zones with different weather, indoor, outdoor. But at this point, it's not an exception anymore. It's part of your every week schedule, if you will, in the MLS. Friends, if you have questions or comments, please send them our way. If nothing else, a shout out. We appreciate you following us. We're less than 10 minutes, probably from the kickoff. I know it won't be exactly at the top of the hour. Typically, Laura, when there's a kickoff, it's about 7 or 8 minutes in. After the top of the hour, taking a couple of breaks. Number one, Laura, as we are trying to see if people are chiming in or have any questions, what is your expectation of this series? Meaning, do you expect Houston to perform well? And does it begin tonight versus waiting for the second game maybe? We'll get to our predictions of who wins the series in a little bit. But in general terms, Houston has earned this. They deserve it. Do they perform well in this first round series?
I mean, I think it would be a positive thing to kind of set the tone and not just go out there and say, well, we have other games, whatever. It is what it is. I think that would be a mistake, whether it be strategic or not. I don't think that would be the way to go. I think that it would be good to set the tone specifically, in as a visitor, set the tone and win.
Sure.
Or at least get a tough tie from there. So I think they're very capable of doing specifically with this team. I think that it's very plausible for it to happen. Yes, they've had a lot of difficulties in this, in this field. It's the third time that these teams meet each other in the playoffs. The last one wasn't a positive for the Dynamo. I think it was in 2017. Yeah, so I think that. Yep. So I think that this is the kind of the moment to redeem the past and kind of set a new tone. And they're really talking about being a new Dynamo and setting the tone for not only what they keep doing in this playoffs, but what comes to be of this team.
Pressure. Is there pressure? I think you've answered this already here in our pregame, which is the pressure is really not on the Dynamo or on Ben Olsen. I don't think they have much to lose tonight. In particular, go out there, perform. If they win, if they get a result, let's put it out there, they're already way ahead.
No, I absolutely. I think, again, especially because they don't have the home field advantage. I'd like to see them go for it in this first game. Trying to maybe put their best foot forward. They can again punch them in the mouth early, get a couple of goals. Really test that side of their game because I think that's the balance that they're missing. And that if I see that, I can believe they can maybe go all the way. But they'll probably try to keep things compact, try to keep the game close. Again, Seattle at home, they can play on that turf. They can sort of dominate teams that allow them to, especially when Houston doesn't really try to stretch them as much. But no, pressure's on Jordan Morris to show up for Seattle and start delivering playoff wins. Right, pressure's on some of these guys. Stephen Fry's obviously one. Nuhu, Yamar, Roldan. I mean, I think again the pressure because of what Seattle's done lately. Brian Schmetzer, who just got a contract extension.
Great coach.
That's where the pressure is. But I think we know how they'll handle it. Houston's got to do something that they don't expect to force them to out of their game, out of their comfort zone.
Laura, at this level of MLS, these teams know each other well, the scouting. There's not many surprises. I use the cliche in most of the broadcasts that I'm a part of. It comes down to the moments, the mistakes, capitalizing on those, eliminating mistakes. And that's the difference. If you make a mistake, the other team pounces on it, they put the ball in the back of the goal, and you're down a goal. So my point in my question, Laura, for your opinion is, with very little that can change surprise-wise, how much do you risk, number one? And then you've got to execute. At the end of the day, you've got to execute your game plan. You've got to be consistent and wait for those moments. At least that's my perspective. Your thoughts?
No, yeah, I agree. I just think that, again, just because of the formatting, perhaps they're not going to, go and try to do the best that they can in this first game. I think that it's going to be kind of like, warm lukewater kind of ambient for both teams. I don't think that they're going to go out there and do it all. I do think that they want to get positive results. And like you mentioned, the Dynamo honestly doesn't have that much pressure as compared to, their rival. But in the sense, they do have pressure to show that, they're really a true contender. Because again, if you read the news, if you listen to, podcasts or Twitter or whatever you read on social media, again, they're not counting on the Dynamo doing anything or going further. It's something that's been, that happens a lot. The Dynamo is not credited sometimes where it is due, just because of the lack of perhaps of being, stable and keeping this kind of flow throughout the different seasons. So it would be nice to kind of, hush some mouths in different, states and cities and show that the Dynamo is going really places and is serious about the growth that they're doing, that it's not just a coincidence of, the second time in playoffs, but they're really working and building on not only making it to the playoffs, but making it further into the playoffs and winning the whole thing. Again, it's kind of like, again, no pressure, but at the end of the day, for me, it would be pressure because there's a lot of eyes on, the Dynamo and already discrediting them and not saying that they're going to make it far. So in that sense, I think that the pressure is on for the Houston team.
Fans, what do you think? Please be a part of the conversation. I'm Alex Parra. Beside me, Victor Araiza. You see Laura Gomez also with us in our special edition of the Soccer Tejas podcast. We're just a few minutes away from kickoff. Victor, any questions, comments, any thoughts here as we wrap up? And then I will ask for your predictions.
None that I see so far. I was just trying to, look at social media a little bit, see the crowd at pitch 25. I don't know if Brian's going to have a full house, but, again, I think there is some excitement, and this could grow here with a victory. The one thing I'll just kind of say, to what Laura was saying, the opposite end of that, Seattle, I don't think they're going to mess around. I think if they win this game, they're coming to Houston Sunday to finish this series.
Get it done in two.
That's why I think you have to go and take it to them. And I think maybe the advantage the Dynamo have, and I don't think from what I'm short memory here, I'm getting old, but from the last trip,
join the club.
From the last trip that they made up there, Herrera was injured, right? So he wasn't part of this. So that's an added bonus in this series here. And I do think the one pressure maybe that the Dynamo have is the window to win with Hector Herrera. That's the only thing where maybe
which may be this season.
This season and possibly the next. If again, his future's still up in the air. If
right.
they want to bring him, if they decide to bring him back, or if they agree on, you know how agents are, and in negotiating. But I think again, for me, the fact that they didn't were more proactive during the season last year when they were kind of getting lightning in the bottle. That's the disappointment for me because I thought maybe they could have tried to get to the final had they fixed their scoring struggles. This year, I think maybe they're a little bit more experienced, but that window's closing with Hector Herrera. You got to win while you can.
I expected a little more optimism going into the match, but this is typical
No,
Victor.
I'm saying you got what it takes to beat him. Go out there and do it.
Tonight, what happens?
I think the Dynamo will be conservative. I think Seattle wins.
That's Victor's prediction, Laura. Before we
That was enough positive. You mentioned him being positive, and it went out the
Delusional.
window.
I'm not gonna be delusional.
I was expecting something much more positive. Laura, what is your prediction for tonight's match?
I want to say 1-1.
I'm with you, Laura. I see a tie,
Hold
to
on,
be
hold on.
honest.
Okay,
Yeah,
so 1-1. So who are you taking in penalties?
yeah, because you have to go, right?
You have to pick one.
You have to pick one.
Somebody's got to win tonight.
Alex asked me what the final score was. So the final score for me, what is it? After the penalties? No, he said the final score of the game. So the final score of the game
if
is
they
1-1.
finish 1-1,
For
they gotta go to
penalties, Hold on.
The format, yeah.
for penalties, I want to say Dynamo.
There you go.
I expect a surprise tonight. I'm going to say I expect Houston to come out with the victory tonight.
Okay.
In the context of the format and the tie.
One of us has to be right at the post game.
Well, speaking of the post game, that's a great pitch. So we're about to go because I know the broadcast is about to start. Number one, thanks to all of you for following us, friends. We appreciate it. But immediately at the conclusion of the match, we'll be on live here again. We'll also see if we can take some of the press conference live from Seattle so we can kind of hear the post game comments. So on behalf of all of us, we appreciate you being part of this special edition of the Soccer Tejas podcast. Today, focusing on the Houston versus Seattle MLS playoff series starting tonight. So a lot riding on this game for both teams without a doubt, and we will be covering it throughout the evening, number one, and of course throughout the series. So Laura, thank you for your time. Victor, thank you. And friends, thanks to all of you for watching us and following us here on this latest edition of the Soccer Tejas